The phone rang at 2 a.m., shattering the silence. Emily jolted awake, her heart thundering. She whispered, "Daniel, who's calling so late?" He fumbled for the phone, his face pale in the glow of the screen. Emily noticed his hand tremble. He answered with a hushed voice, "You shouldn't call me here." The words sliced her like glass. Confusion swirled. Who was he talking to? She leaned closer, straining to hear. Daniel's tone shifted, urgent, pleading. "I'll see you tomorrow, just stay calm." He turned, realizing Emily was watching, his smile forced, his voice stiff. "Wrong number," he muttered. Emily's gut tightened, suspicion blooming like poison. Emily lay frozen, her mind echoing his whispered words. The clock ticked louder, mocking her silence. She asked, "Who was that?" Daniel forced a laugh, brushing her hair aside, his voice too calm. "Some idiot with the wrong number." The lie stung. She nodded, pretending to believe, though her chest tightened. In her heart, doubt had already bloomed. Daniel kissed her temple, but his lips felt cold. The night was broken. Emily turned away, eyes open in the dark, whispering to herself, "It wasn't a wrong number." Morning light seeped through the curtains, but Emily felt no warmth. She watched Daniel leave for work, his tie perfectly knotted, his smile practiced. He kissed her cheek and whispered, "Don't wait up tonight." Her stomach nodded. His car roared away, leaving silence too heavy for daylight. Emily's phone buzzed with a text from her friend Laura. "You sounded off last night. Want to talk?" Emily typed, "Later," but didn't send. She stood at the window, staring at the empty driveway, whispering, "Where are you really going, Daniel?" Daniel's day seemed flawless from the outside. At the office, his colleagues admired his charm, his confidence, his perfect smile. But Emily's thoughts raced at home, replaying the midnight call. She walked through the kitchen, hands trembling, replaying his words in her head. "You shouldn't call me here." She whispered aloud, "Who is she?" The coffee pot hissed, steam rising like smoke from her doubts. Emily's reflection in the dark window looked like a stranger, tired, frightened, already betrayed. That night, Emily tried to bury her doubts, but the silence was unbearable. The clock ticked past midnight. Daniel still wasn't home. She paced the hallway, whispering, "Where are you?" Her phone glowed with his message, "Late meeting. Don't wait." Her chest tightened. Emily sat on the stairs, pulling her robe tight around her. A single tear slipped down her cheek as she whispered, "You're lying." The house seemed to listen, each shadow deepening, every creak echoing her fear. Emily tried to bury the unease by clinging to normalcy. She cooked breakfast, eggs sizzling in the pan, the smell filling the kitchen. Daniel entered with a smile that felt rehearsed. He kissed her cheek, saying, "You're spoiling me." She forced a smile, her eyes searching his face for cracks. His phone buzzed on the counter, but he quickly flipped it face down. Emily's chest tightened. She asked, "Big day at work?" Daniel laughed lightly. "Always." She nodded, hiding her growing doubt behind the clatter of plates. Deep down she felt the warmth between them was turning fragile, like glass about to shatter. Later, Emily met her friend Laura at a cafe downtown. The chatter of strangers and clinking cups surrounded them. Laura leaned forward, her eyes sharp with concern. "You look pale. What's wrong?" Emily hesitated, her hands curling around her coffee mug. I don't know Daniel lately." Laura's brow furrowed. "What happened?" Emily whispered. "Someone called him in the middle of the night." Laura's lips pressed into a thin line. "That's not nothing." Emily's throat tightened. She wanted to cry but forced herself to smile. "Maybe I'm overthinking." Still, her heart screamed she wasn't. That evening, Emily prepared dinner, trying to drown her doubts in routine. The table was set with candles, soft music playing. Daniel walked in late, tie loosened, jacket slung over his shoulder. "Smells amazing," he said, kissing her cheek. She smiled, but her chest felt heavy. They sat down, clinking glasses, pretending everything was fine. Emily studied his every gesture, his laughter, the way he avoided eye contact when she asked about work. She whispered, "I missed you." He reached for her hand, saying warmly, "I'm right here." Yet Emily felt he was already somewhere else. Later that night, Emily lay beside Daniel in bed, listening to his breathing. She whispered softly, "Do you love me?" His eyes remained closed, but his hand slid over hers. "Always," he murmured. Her throat tightened. The words were perfect, but something in his tone felt hollow, distant. She studied the curve of his face in the dim light, wondering if she was sleeping beside the man she married, or someone she no longer knew. A tear slid silently across her pillow. She turned away, whispering, "Please don't lie to me." The next morning, Emily walked through the garden with Laura on the phone. The autumn air was crisp, leaves crunching underfoot. "I don't know how to explain it," Emily said, her voice breaking. "I feel like he's slipping away from me." Laura's voice softened through the line. "Emily, trust your gut. If something feels wrong, it usually is." Emily's eyes stung as she whispered, "But I love him. I can't imagine my life without him." Laura replied gently, "Loving him doesn't mean ignoring the truth." Emily stopped, staring at the cold sky, realizing the storm in her heart was only growing. Emily noticed the cracks widening in ways she could no longer ignore. That afternoon, she reached into Daniel's jacket to hang it up, and a folded receipt slipped out, drifting to the floor. She picked it up, her breath hitching as her eyes scanned the words. It was for an expensive dinner for two at a restaurant she had never visited, dated the same night he had claimed a meeting ran late. Her pulse thudded painfully in her ears as she whispered, "He wasn't in a meeting." When Daniel walked in later, loosening his tie, his smile felt too smooth. Emily laid the slip of paper on the kitchen counter like evidence. "How was your late meeting?" she asked quietly, her voice trembling. His eyes flicked to the receipt before her, and for a fraction of a second, his mask slipped. "Exhausting," he said evenly. She studied him, fear and anger colliding inside her. She wanted to scream, but instead whispered, "Stop lying to me." The words dropped like ice into the air, cutting through their fragile silence. Daniel dismissed her doubts with the same polished charm he had always used. He laughed, taking the slip of paper from the counter and sliding it into his pocket as if it were nothing. "A client dinner, nothing more," he said smoothly. Emily's chest ached as she pressed. "Then why hide it?" His gaze hardened, his voice sharpening. "Because you overreact, Emily. You always do." The words stung, twisting guilt into her heart like a blade. She stared at the floor, her voice barely audible. "I'm not crazy, Daniel." His tone softened suddenly, his hand brushing her arm as he leaned close. "I love you. Stop torturing yourself." His tenderness should have comforted her, but it felt hollow, almost rehearsed. She nodded faintly, though her throat burned with words left unsaid. Inside, her mind screamed louder than ever. Each denial left her tangled deeper in his web, unsure whether she was uncovering truth or being pushed further into madness. The next afternoon, Emily could no longer stand the suffocating doubt. She drove across town to Daniel's office without telling him, her fingers gripping the steering wheel until her knuckles whitened. She parked across the street, her pulse rattling like thunder in her chest. Minutes passed before the door opened and Daniel stepped out, not alone. A woman walked beside him, one Emily had never seen before. She was poised, professional, with dark hair and a confident stride. They laughed together, Daniel's hand brushing against her back with a casual intimacy that made Emily's stomach twist. She whispered to herself, "Who are you?" The woman handed him a folder, but their eyes lingered on each other longer than necessary. Emily's breath caught, her world tilting. She wanted to storm across the street and demand answers, but instead she sank lower in her seat, her body trembling. Silence filled the car as betrayal pressed down like a weight she could not escape. That evening, Emily sat with Laura in her apartment, unable to contain the truth any longer. Her voice cracked as she whispered, "I saw him with someone. They were laughing." He touched her back. Laura's eyes widened in shock. "Emily, did you confront him?" Emily shook her head, staring at her trembling hands. "I couldn't. I froze. It felt like I couldn't breathe." Laura reached out, placing her hand firmly over Emily's. "You need the truth, Emily. Don't let him twist your mind into knots." Emily's eyes blurred with tears as she choked. "What if I can't handle it? What if knowing destroys me?" Laura squeezed her hand tighter, her voice steady. "Then I'll hold you through it." Emily's tears spilled freely, her chest heaving. She buried her face in her hands, whispering, "I don't know who my husband is anymore." The words echoed in the small room, heavy and final, as if they could not be taken back. Later that night, Emily sat in the darkened living room, her heart pounding as she waited. The only sound was the ticking clock on the wall, each second heavier than the last. When the front door creaked open, Daniel stepped inside, his silhouette framed in the dim glow from the streetlight outside. She whispered from the shadows, "Where were you?" He stiffened, pausing in the doorway before forcing a smile that came too slowly. "Work, you know that." Emily rose from the sofa, her eyes burning. "Don't do this to me, Daniel. Don't keep feeding me lies." His voice snapped sharper than before. "You're imagining things. You're making yourself crazy." Her throat ached as she pushed back, her voice trembling yet firm. "Then prove it. Show me the truth." For a moment, silence roared louder than his words. Daniel stepped closer, his shadow stretching long across the room, his expression unreadable. Emily's chest tightened as fear and fury clashed. The line between love and betrayal blurred into something unbearable. Emily's doubts reached a breaking point when a letter arrived, slipped beneath the door while Daniel was at work. The envelope bore no return address, only her name in rushed handwriting. With trembling hands, she tore it open and unfolded the contents. Inside was a photograph, Daniel, arm around the woman she had seen outside his office, both smiling like lovers on a weekend trip. The date scrawled on the back froze her blood. It was the same night he had told her he was traveling for business. Emily staggered back, clutching the photo as though it burned. Her mind screamed, her chest hollowed, her body shook. When Daniel returned home, she hid the letter under the drawer, whispering to herself, "He is living another life." That evening, Emily couldn't hold her silence. She confronted Daniel at the dinner table, placing the photograph beside his plate with deliberate calm. His fork froze mid-air, his eyes darting from her face to the image. "What is this?" she demanded, voice low but unrelenting. Daniel's face darkened, then softened in seconds. "It's nothing, Emily. Just work." She slammed her hand on the table, tears streaming down. "Work doesn't look like this." The picture lay between them like a weapon, undeniable proof of betrayal. Daniel's jaw clenched, words faltering. For the first time, Emily saw fear flicker behind his mask. Daniel's calm cracked. His voice rose, sharp and defensive. "You're twisting everything. She's just a colleague." Emily's breath came in ragged bursts as she pushed the photograph closer. "Then why did she slip this under our door?" He froze, his mask faltering again, his silence louder than any denial. Emily's voice broke as she whispered, "How many lies, Daniel? How many?" He reached across the table, his hand desperate, but she recoiled, shaking her head. The illusion he had built for years crumbled before them, each shard of deception cutting her deeper. The room seemed to shrink, air heavy with truth. Later that night, Emily searched Daniel's study while he showered, her pulse hammering in her ears. She rifled through drawers, files, and notebooks until she found a hidden envelope beneath a stack of documents. Inside were receipts, photographs, and even a second phone. Her breath hitched as she scrolled through its screen, messages filled with endearments, promises, and meetings with the other woman. She covered her mouth to muffle a sob. The walls spun around her as the truth pressed down, undeniable. The man she had loved and trusted was living as two people, and she had been married to both without knowing. When Daniel entered the study, towel draped over his shoulders, his eyes locked on the phone in her trembling hands. For a moment time froze, their stares colliding like fire and ice. Emily whispered, her voice shaking but firm. "Who are you really, Daniel?" His jaw tightened, lips parting as if to lie again, but no words came. The silence was deafening, a crack in the facade he had guarded so carefully. Emily's tears turned to fury. "You've been living two lives," she said, her tone rising. Daniel stepped forward, desperation flickering, but she stepped back, clutching the phone like a shield. The truth was out, and nothing could bury it again. The storm broke in their living room. Emily hurled the second phone at Daniel's chest, her voice shaking with fury. "How long have you been lying to me?" Daniel caught it, his jaw tightening, his mask crumbling. "You don't understand," he snapped, his voice raw. Emily's chest heaved, her tears hot. "Then make me understand. Tell me why I was never enough." His silence carved deeper wounds than words. She screamed, "I built my life around you, Daniel." He paced like a cornered animal, sweat shining on his temples. "You were supposed to never find out." The confession shattered her world. Emily's voice cracked as she pressed harder. "Who is she, Daniel? Tell me her name." He shouted back, "She means nothing." His rage echoed through the room, but his words betrayed him. Emily stepped closer, eyes blazing. "Then why build a life with her?" His fists clenched, his face twisted. "Because I couldn't stop. Because I wanted both." Emily's knees weakened, her body trembling as though struck. "You stole years from me," she whispered. Daniel reached for her arm, desperate, but she yanked away, her body shaking with both terror and fury. The truth was laid bare, and it was unbearable. The confrontation exploded further. Emily shoved the drawer open, scattering receipts and photographs across the floor. "This is proof," she cried. Daniel's eyes flickered with panic, his face pale. "Stop digging, Emily. You'll destroy us both." She dropped to her knees, clutching the papers. "You already destroyed me," she whispered. Daniel slammed his hand on the table, the sound thunderous. "I gave you everything." Her voice cracked into a scream. "You gave me nothing but lies." The air was heavy, suffocating, as though the house itself absorbed their pain. Emily felt her heart splitting under the unbearable weight of truth. Daniel collapsed into a chair, burying his face in his hands. "I never meant to hurt you," he muttered, voice trembling. Emily stood frozen, her tears falling unchecked. "You didn't just hurt me, you erased me." He looked up, eyes bloodshot. "I loved you both." Emily recoiled at the words, bile rising in her throat. "Loved us both," she spat. "Do you hear yourself?" He reached toward her, his voice breaking. "Please, don't leave me." Emily shook her head, stepping back into the shadows. "I don't even know who you are anymore." The space between them was filled with unbearable silence. The climax peaked as Emily finally broke. She screamed with all the rage she had buried. "I gave you everything. My trust, my love, my life, and you built a prison of lies around me." Daniel stood, his face twisted in anguish. "I can fix this," he pleaded. Emily shook her head, her voice cold and final. "You can't fix what you shattered." The room shook with her words, silence pressing in after. For the first time, Daniel looked small, powerless, unraveling before her eyes. Emily's heart bled, but in that moment, fury carried her higher than despair. Nothing would ever be the same again. The house felt unbearably silent after the shouting ended. Emily sat on the edge of the couch, her body trembling, her eyes swollen from tears. Daniel lingered in the corner, head bowed, words trapped in his throat. The space between them was filled with broken trust, the remnants of their life scattered like shards across the floor. Emily whispered, "I don't know if I can breathe in this house anymore." Daniel raised his head slowly, his face hollow. "Please don't go," he said, his voice stripped of power. She closed her eyes, her chest aching. "You've already lost me," she murmured. The next morning, sunlight spilled across the kitchen, cruel in its normalcy. Emily moved through the room like a ghost, placing cups on the counter, her hands shaking. Daniel sat at the table, unshaven, his eyes bloodshot, staring into his coffee like it held answers. "We can work through this," he said, his voice brittle. Emily turned slowly, her gaze hollow. "There is no will left." He flinched at the words, but said nothing more. The silence was thick, filled with everything they could no longer say. Emily felt the weight of finality pressing against her ribs with every shallow breath. Emily wandered into their bedroom, her eyes landing on framed photographs of vacations, anniversaries, and smiles that now looked like lies. She touched one with trembling fingers, whispering, "Was any of it real?" The walls seemed to echo her question back at her. Behind her, Daniel appeared in the doorway, his expression unreadable. "I loved you, Emily," he said softly. She turned, her eyes wet but steady. "No, Daniel, you loved yourself enough to keep 2 lives." He stepped closer, but she raised her hand to stop him. "Don't rewrite our story to ease your guilt." His shoulders sagged, his silence an admission. Emily called Laura later that day, her voice heavy but steadier than before. "It's over," she whispered. Laura's voice softened through the line. "You're stronger than you think." Emily sat by the window, staring at the falling leaves, her mind torn between grief and freedom. "I don't feel strong," she admitted. "I feel broken." Laura replied firmly, "Broken isn't the end. It's the start of rebuilding." Emily closed her eyes, letting the words sink in. She clutched the phone tighter, whispering, "Then I'll rebuild, even if it takes everything I have left." For the first time, resolve stirred beneath her pain. That evening, Emily stood alone in the garden, as dusk settled, cool air brushing against her skin. Daniel's voice carried faintly from inside, but she didn't move. She closed her eyes, breathing in the silence, letting the world feel hers again. She whispered to herself, "I survived this day." For the first time, the weight on her chest lifted slightly. The lies had torn her world apart, but the pieces still belonged to her, and she would choose how to rebuild them. Behind her, Daniel's shadow lingered at the doorway, but she did not turn. The distance between them was final. Emily awoke before dawn, the house wrapped in silence except for the faint hum of the refrigerator. She sat on the edge of the bed, her robe pulled tightly around her, staring at Daniel's sleeping form. His face looked peaceful, almost innocent in the dim light, but she knew the truth lurking beneath that mask. Her heart twisted, remembering the words, the proof, the second phone. She whispered to herself, "I can't live like this anymore." Her voice cracked, the sound barely louder than her breath. She stood and moved quietly through the house, her bare feet cold against the wooden floor. In the kitchen, she pulled a small suitcase from the pantry, one she had hidden days ago, and began filling it with clothes she had tucked away secretly. Each fold of fabric felt like a final goodbye. Tears blurred her vision, but her hands kept moving. When the sun finally began to break over the horizon, she zipped the suitcase shut with trembling hands. She looked around the kitchen one last time, whispering, "This was never home. It was a stage, and I was trapped in your play." As Emily moved toward the front door, suitcase in hand, Daniel stirred awake and realized she was gone. He rushed downstairs, panic flashing across his face when he saw her silhouette framed by the morning light. "Emily, wait!" he shouted, his voice raw, desperate. She froze, her back to him, every nerve screaming. Slowly, she turned, her eyes red but steady. "No more waiting, Daniel. I've wasted too many years." He stepped forward, reaching out, his voice breaking. "I can change. Please don't leave me." His words fell heavy in the still air, filled with panic but lacking truth. Emily's lips trembled, but her voice carried strength she had never known. "You had 2 lives. I only had one, and you destroyed it." Daniel's body crumpled slightly, his hand lowering as though her words struck him physically. The silence that followed was deafening. For the first time, he had no defense, no charm, only the ruins of the lies he had built. Emily's chest rose and fell quickly, but she didn't waver. She knew this was the moment she had to choose herself. Daniel collapsed to his knees in the hallway, his voice cracking with pain. "Don't go, Emily. You're all I have." His desperation echoed through the walls, filling the air with sorrow that should have broken her heart. Emily's grip on the suitcase tightened, her hands trembling, but she stood her ground. "You had me," she said sharply. "You had me every day, every night, and it wasn't enough. You built another world while I carried this one." Daniel shook his head violently, tears sliding down his face. "I never meant for it to happen. I love you." Emily's breath caught, her chest tightening, but she steadied her voice. "Love isn't supposed to tear someone in half." Her words hung in the air like a blade. Daniel crawled forward, trying to clutch her robe, but she stepped back, his fingers grasping at emptiness. For the first time in years, she felt the strength of choice surging through her veins. She whispered, "I'm choosing me." The words struck like thunder, reverberating in the hollow house, sealing their fate forever. Emily stepped outside, the crisp morning air filling her lungs, sharp and cold. The suitcase felt heavy, but lighter than the years of betrayal she left behind. She walked down the path slowly, each step deliberate, the gravel crunching beneath her shoes. Behind her, Daniel's voice echoed faintly, calling her name again and again, but she didn't turn back. The rising sun painted the sky in pale golds and pinks, a new day dawning as her old life crumbled. She whispered softly, "This time, I'm free." Her words vanished into the wind, carried away like a prayer for survival. Emily paused at the gate, her breath visible in the morning chill. She didn't look back, not even once. Her heart pounded, but it beat with a rhythm that was finally hers. The betrayal had broken her, but it had also remade her. She whispered, "This is the end of us." The finality in her voice was sharp as glass. Daniel's shadow lingered in the distance, shrinking as the light grew stronger. Emily stepped through the gate, the latch clicking shut behind her like the sealing of fate. For the first time, silence felt like peace, and the world belonged to her again.